Thanks. Yep.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the November meeting of the Application Review Subcommittee of the ICOC. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
Yes.
Dan Bernal.
Present.
Judy Chow.
Present.
Leandra Clark Harvey. Leandra.
Present.
Thank you. Anne Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon. Mark Fisher Colbury.
Here.
Fred Fisher.
Here.
Elena Flowers.
Here.
David Higgins.
Here.
Steve Julesgard. Rich Lahara.
Here.
Christine Miskowski.
Here.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Here.
Adriana Padilla.
Here.
Joe Panetta.
Here.
Al Roulette. Marvin Southard.
Here.
Jonathan Thomas.
Here.
Art Torres.
Present.
Carol Watson. We have a quorum, JT.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we are going to take item 4 in advance of item 3, just to keep everybody on their toes this morning. And item 4 is consideration of applications submitted in response to clinical trial stage projects, program announcements, CLINs 1, 2, or 3. We have a presentation by Dr. Sembrano. Gil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, let me put this in presentation mode. Give me a second. All right, well, good morning, everyone. So today we have the recommendations from the grants working group for our latest round of clinical projects. And as always, we start with our mission as the grounding for us as we start this, and also when we start our reviews. Our mission is to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. This is a reminder of the status of our clinical budget. We have an annual allocation for the fiscal year of $169 million. Currently, we have 29.8 that have been approved by the board, and we have 25.1 that are pending today. Should all of those be approved, we would have a remainder of about $114 million in our annual budget. The scientific scoring system that is used for clinical program applications is uses a 1, 2, 3 scale, with a score of 1 meaning exceptional merit and warranting funding. Score of 2 means that those applications typically go back to the applicant for revisions to come back at the next available cycle with any comments related to concerns from reviewers. The score of 3 means that the application is sufficiently flawed that it needs to go back and can't come back to term for 6 months. The review criteria that the grants working group uses to score the applications are based on the following 5 questions. Does the project hold the necessary significance and potential for impact? Meaning, what value does it offer, and is it something that is worth doing? Does it have a good rationale? Is the project well planned and designed? And is it feasible, including whether they have the appropriate resources and personnel to carry out the project? And lastly, does the project uphold the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion? The grants working group itself is composed of different member types and that have different roles. We have our scientific grants working group members who are all from outside of California. They provide the scientific expertise and evaluation, and we bring together a panel that brings different perspectives scientifically to the review to make sure that we cover the needs of each application. We also have our patient advocate and nurse grants working group members who perform the DEI evaluation, provide us with a patient perspective on the significance and impact of these projects, and also provide oversight on the process. And our patient advocate nurse members provide a DEI score on all applications and provide a suggested scientific score. We also have, depending on the application, scientific specialists who are non-voting members that will participate on an ad hoc basis. They provide an initial but not a final scientific score and contribute to any knowledge gaps we may have in the panel. And so before I introduce each of the applications, just a note again about conflicts of interest. So board members listed may have a conflict of interest with one or more of the applications that we will be talking about. So just bear that in mind. All right, so then the first application is entitled Genome Editing of Autologous Hematopoietic Stem Cells to Treat Severe Mucopolysaccharidosis Type 1 or Hurler syndrome. The therapy itself is an autologous blood stem cell that is edited to restore the iduronidase enzyme expression in those cells. So the indication is for severe MPS 1. The goal of this project is to complete IND-enabling studies and the filing of IND. So this is a Clin 1 proposal. The funds requested is just under $6 million by the applicant. So a little background on MPS 1. This is a lysosomal storage disease that affects children and results in neurologic, musculoskeletal, and cardiorespiratory deterioration. And it's in a severe form. The disease is diagnosed at infancy and is fatal within the first 10 years of life. The current standard of care involves enzyme replacement therapy and allogeneic blood cell transplant, neither which is adequately effective in treating these patients. The proposed autologous therapy does hold the potential for a safer and hopefully a more effective treatment for patients with MPS 1. And this therapeutic candidate is composed of blood or hematopoietic stem cells, and is why it qualifies for CERM funding. There are not other similar CERM portfolio projects, or at least any that are focused on this indication, although we do in our portfolio have several others that in one way or another address a rare disease and or a lysosomal storage disease of some type. We have one that's much earlier stage, I believe, a trans for MPS 3, which is a different lysosomal storage disorder, but nothing that is focused on MPS 1. These applicants have also not previously received a CERM award. The grants working group recommendation for this application is shown here. We had 13 votes for a score of 1, no votes for a score of 2 or 3. The DEI score on a scale of 1 to 10 is an 8 from our patient advocate and nurse members, and the CERM team recommendation is to fund this application for $5.999 million. And Mr. Chairman, I'll give this back to you.
Thank you, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
Moved by Anne Marie. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that? Sorry.
Bernal.
Bernal. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Any questions or comments from the public?
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can't see on my screen for some reason. Sorry, Fred. Go ahead.
It's all right. No questions about the proposal in particular, except two things that maybe Gil can clarify. Number one, are we intentionally blinded to who the applicant is on these summaries?
Yeah.
Okay, and my second question is, with what frequency do these awards have, or these applications have zero matching funds?
Yeah, so the matching funds usually indicate what the requirement is. So particularly for Clin 1 and Phase 1, if they're an academic institution, there is no co-funding required and typically no co-funding provided. For companies, the co-funding requirement begins at Clin 1 at usually 30% and then goes up to 40% depending on the phase of the trial. So typically that will indicate whether it's a late stage trial, if it's academic, or if it's a company that's coming in.
Great, thanks for that.
Maria, any other comments or questions from the board?
There are no other hands raised.
Thank you. Comments from members of the public?
I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. Will you please call the roll?
Yes. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow,
Aye.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Aye.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
Ed Fisher,
Aye.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Torres. Art, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye.
Thank you. Carol Watson. Motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Gil, next application, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next application is Clin 2 14024. So this is a clinical trial application. The title is Sequential Same Donor Alpha Beta Depleted HSCT from an HLA partially matched donor allowing immunosuppression-free kidney transplant. The therapy is an allogeneic blood stem cell product depleted of T cells of the alpha beta type, along with CD19 positive B cells. The indication is for renal failure due to one of 4 genetic and or immunological diseases. The goal of this study is to complete a phase 1 study to assess feasibility and safety. And the funds requested for this are 11.9 million. Background on these indications. So this study is focused on pediatric and young adult kidney transplantation, and improvement in long-term outcomes for these patients remains an unmet medical need due to immune-mediated graft rejection and infection. And most children that require a kidney transplant are going to need an additional transplant at some point and does require lifelong immunosuppression. So the proposed therapy has the potential to reduce the risk of chronic transplant rejection and the need for repeat transplantation and the need for immunosuppression by retaining the immune system to develop tolerance to the donor kidney. The project itself is a stem cell project because the therapeutic candidate is composed of blood stem cells. We have several projects in our portfolio that address kidney failure, 3 of them, that have somewhat similar approaches in that they are trying to achieve tolerance of the transplant through slightly different but also somewhat similar approaches of providing donor stem cells that are depleted in T cells in a variety of ways. We also have another project that's focused on cystinosis. So cystinosis is one of the target indications that also has kidney failure as a part of it. This particular project is focused on treating and curing cystinosis, not necessarily just the kidney failure part, but I included that as an FYI. This particular applicant has not previously received a CERM award, and the grants working group recommendation is as follows. There were 15 members that gave this a score of 1, and no members giving it a score of 2 or 3. The DEI score on a scale of 1 to 10 was a 9, as given by our patient advocate and nurse members. And the term team recommendation is to fund this application for the award amount shown. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Leandra. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, Gil, actually, thank you again for a very clear presentation. Do you think there is a lot of redundancy between this project and the other project that you mentioned already funded for similar indications of renal transplant? What's the degree of redundancy?
There is some redundancy simply in the overall general approach to try to achieve tolerance, but each of them is focused on a slightly different way of doing it. This one is particularly different because it is focused on children and young adults, as opposed to the others that are more focused on adult patients. So it does distinguish itself a bit from those others.
Okay. In any case, should we view our judgment to support or not based on the overall merit of the application, or should we be influenced by the fact that we have already invested a lot of money on renal transplant? Should that be a consideration?
Well, I think that's a consideration of the board, absolutely, in terms of, you know, looking at our overall portfolio and whether the board thinks that the investment made here is either too redundant, to what extent we want to continue funding projects in this area or not. In general, at CERN, we've taken the approach that several shots on goal is generally a good idea because we don't expect that everything will work. But I think as a programmatic consideration of the board, it's definitely something to take into account.
Thank you.
Anne-Marie, I in response to that question, I will trot out my old comment about the Chilean miners who were, if you recall, stuck in that cave a number of years ago, and they bore 3 different tunnels in the hopes that one of them at least would reach the miners and allow them to be freed. So that is sort of what I view our task as being. I agree that multiple shots on goal from slightly different approaches are something that we do strongly consider, and in the hopes that one or more of these will actually work in the end. So I with this respect to this application, for example, would strongly be in favor that we approve it.
There are
Yes.
2 other hands raised.
Okay, I see. Could you name them, please, Maria?
Mark Fisher-Colgrave, if you'd like to go next.
Mark.
Yeah, first of all, Anne-Marie's question is an outstanding one, and I think it's one we should always be asking. So that's a terrific question. And also wanted to echo JT's comments in the context that I think given the hypercriticality and potential impact of what could arise from these opportunities, it would be fantastic for the continuation of this particular grant award. So just a general comment, but outstanding question from Anne-Marie.
Joe.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks, Mark. Maria, who else is?
It's Joe next.
Joe, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, JT. I agree with everything that's been said. But I was just thinking we have a real expert in this arena on the team in our president and CEO. And I wonder if there's any more clarification as to the redundancy that Maria might be able to provide to us.
Chairman Thomas, should I respond?
Please.
Thank you so much for that question. And as you said, this is an area of research that I was involved in my former life. The idea of this particular project, as Dr. Sombrano had stated, is that there is a different type of blood stem cell preparation that's being given in combination with a kidney transplant to induce tolerance from our prior projects in terms of how certain subpopulations are depleted. And so the data, as stated in the summary, suggests that this increases the probability of success of the transplanted donor stem cells to establish itself and create the immune system that allows tolerance and the acceptance of the transplanted kidney as self versus non-self, which are typically rejected. So that's one point, is the approach itself. The second point is that the fact that this is in pediatric patients and our other programs are not in pediatric patients, and there are definitely differences, as you know, with any approach testing pediatrics versus adults, in terms of impact. Long-term immunosuppression, just by sheer, rules of physics, long-term immunosuppression in children, the risk of that is going to be higher because of the cumulative effects of immunosuppression. Also, children are very, very highly susceptible to viral infections and consequences, such as Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, which can actually cause lymphomas and things like that. So the consequences of infection in children who are naive are even greater. So that is, in terms of long-term immunosuppression, the risk benefit for not having immunosuppression also heavily weights for the pediatric patients.
Thank you, Maria. Maria B., any other
Yes,
hands raised?
we've got Fred and Larry.
Thank you. Fred.
Yeah, just for clarification, are these blood stem cells from each individual patient, or are they stem cells that the applicant gets from somewhere and uses? So does this fall within a more of a personalized medicine approach or a more generic stem cell approach?
These are from a matched donor or a haploidentical donor.
But not from the patients themselves.
Not from the patients themselves, but somebody that is partially matched to the patient.
Thank you.
We
Fred,
have
that answer your question okay?
Yeah, it leads to more questions, but this is probably not the time or place for those. So
Okay, thank you. Larry.
Larry's next.
Yeah, I'll make 2 points. One is that a certain degree of redundancy ensures success moving forward. And second, this general approach for tolerizing for organ transplant may not just be for kidneys ultimately, hearts, liver, lung, all the rest where you have allogeneic transplants. And the notion of using transplantation of a blood forming system from the donor of the organ to tolerize the recipient has been on blackboards for years. And I think if we invest in very concentrated and even somewhat overlapping approaches, it is absolutely going to lead to, well, I don't know, success, of course, but it is the right thing to do because it raises our probability of success. And it's an incredibly important approach generally.
Thank you, Larry. Maria, any other hands?
No other board members have their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all board members. Those are all excellent comments as always. Any comments from members of the public?
I had noticed a hand raised previously. I'm not sure that is still the case. I do not see a hand anymore. Okay, nope, no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Can you please call the roll?
Yes. Dan Bernal.
Aye.
Chow.
Aye.
Yonder Clark Harvey.
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Aye.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Aye.
Ed Fisher.
I
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard, Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Cal Watson.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. And I want to amend my comment a second ago. Excellent comments from members of the board, as well as Dr. Milan. Very important perspective that you provided on that answer as well. Thank you. On to the third application, Gil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last application is also a clinical trial application, CLIN 2-14232. The title is the potent first-in-class KDM4 inhibitor for advanced cancers. This is a small molecule inhibitor of KDM4 histone demethylase. The indication is for colorectal cancer. The goal is completion of a phase 1 trial to assess safety and initial efficacy of this small molecule. The funds requested are 4.1 million, and the co-funding amount is about 3 million. Background on
7.1 on the slide. I think I
Sorry?
heard you say. I think I heard you say 4.1, but it says 7.1.
Yes, I'm sorry, 7.1 million. All right, the clinical background on this: colorectal cancer remains an unmet medical need and was the second leading cause of cancer death in the US in 2020. And about 15% of colorectal cancer patients are not responsive to chemotherapy due to a deficiency in DNA repair mechanisms, and that is what this therapeutic is targeting. The standard of care for such advanced colorectal cancer is unresponsive to first-line therapy, including immunocheckpoint inhibitors and or other agents that target angiogenesis or vascularization. And so those that are refractory to those need additional approaches. So if this therapy is successful, it would offer an effective therapeutic option for patients. This therapeutic candidate targets cancer stem cells and is why it qualifies for term funding. In terms of other similar projects, we have several that are addressing different tumor types, some more generically solid tumors. We don't have anything that's focused solely on colorectal cancer, but some like this one that include colorectal cancer as one of the targeted cancers. This one has a very different approach. This project uses cytokine-induced killer cells that contain an oncolytic virus. So very different from the small molecule, but the closest thing that we have in our portfolio currently. This particular applicant has not previously received a term award. And this is a summary of the recommendation from the grants working group. We had 7 members giving this a score of 1. We had 6 members giving it a score of 2, and no one giving it a score of 3. The DEI score by patient advocate and nurse members is a score of 9 on the 1 to 10 scale. And the CERM team recommendation is to fund this application for the amount of 7.1 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Leandra, second.
Rich seconds.
Second, Mark.
Okay. Did you get that, Maria?
I think it was Marvin that got in first, or
Think
was it?
so.
Mark?
Yeah.
We'll take either
Okay.
one. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Brett has his hand raised.
I'm wondering, yeah.
Oh,
I'm
and
sorry. Maria,
no.
who did you say? Sorry.
well, Fred and Anne Marie, whomever would
Okay.
to go
All right,
first.
let's go with Fred first, since I think you mentioned him first. So, Fred.
In reading the comments, I had a hard time finding the reasons why nearly half of the grant working group wanted to send this back to the applicant for revisions. And I couldn't really tease out the rationale for their scores of 2. So I'm wondering if Gil can provide some greater context around nearly half the group wanting to send it back, and the staff's recommendation to move it forward. Because I can't see it from at least it's not jumping out at me from the summary comments to the question.
Thank you, Fred. Gil?
Yeah, Fred, that's a very good question. I think in looking at the comments, there are very few comments provided by those that gave it a score of 2 necessarily. I think many of them had positive comments as well. And sometimes it's also difficult to discern why they kind of fall on the balance on a 2 versus a 1, despite their comments. So the things that seem to lead many to go to a 2 has to do with the dosing. So the proposal is studying or is intending, at least it seems, is preparing a cohort to try to understand what the maximum tolerated dose for a phase 2 would be. There were recommendations from the FDA that as they proceed through their clinical trials, that they assess several doses. So not just necessarily the maximum tolerated dose, but additional doses. And it was unclear whether they were following FDA advice on this or not. So I think there was clarity that was desired on the part of some of the reviewers on that. There were some minor comments related, for example, to the data monitoring committee to make sure that it is independent and is not inclusive of the PI or other personnel. There was a question of whether ultimately the trial was going to have an appropriate accrual of patients and patient identification, and wanted more detail on that part. So those are the things based on the comments that we received from the reviewers that would suggest that that's what led those 6 to score it a 2 rather than a 1.
And just to quickly follow up, so was the applicant suggesting a specific dose for the safety and tolerability, which is typically the focus of a phase 1 trial? So, and the group, or some in the group or the FDA thought they should broaden their dosing regime?
Yes, and so the suggestion based on what was proposed for the trial is that they would do a dose escalation to achieve a maximum tolerated dose, whereas the FDA suggestion was to include multiple doses as they move forward, even beyond the phase 1. But it was unclear whether that was their intent in doing the maximum tolerated dose. There's nothing wrong inherently with setting up the trial to do this. It was just unclear how they were going to move forward with multiple doses as recommended by the FDA.
And has the applicant responded to those questions or concerns that we should know about?
No. Which I think was the reason for giving a 2 in terms of wanting to see a response to that.
Thank you.
Anne-Marie?
Well, my question was the same, but what does it mean of a potential applicant that does not respond to comments? Were they given the time to do it? Should we be concerned about that or not?
No, I mean, since it got a score of 1, we don't seek a response from the applicant.
Okay.
We bring those applications straight to the board. Only if it gets to 2 do we then request those comments.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maria, are there other hands raised by board members?
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from members of the public?
I also do not see hand raised.
Thank you. Then will you please call the roll?
Yes. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow.
Aye.
Leandra Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Thank you. Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard, Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Carol Watson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. I'd just like to comment editorially. Those personally very pleased to see the very high level of DEI scores on all three of those applications as something that we really appreciate and hope that all applicants aspire to. All applicants here gave a great deal of attention to that, and that is reflected in the 8, 9, 9 scores that we had. So let's keep that coming. It's very, very appreciated development. Okay, on to item number 3, which is consideration of applications submitted in response to translational project program announcement trans 1, 2, 3, or 4. Presentation from Dr. Sombrano. Gil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so these are the recommendations from the grants working group for our latest round of grant applications. And once again, we always start with our mission statement. So let me give you a little background on the translation program. This sits squarely between our discovery and clinical programs in advancing products that are therapeutic or otherwise towards clinical trials or towards end use. And so this is an opportunity that we offer twice per year. The translation program supports different types of therapeutic or different types of products, including therapeutics, diagnostics, medical devices, or tools. And it's tailored depending on the product type with different award amounts and different timing that is best suited to develop and take each of these products to the end goal that is described here. So for the translation program, we expect all applicants to come in with some type of proof of concept. If it's a therapeutic, we ask that they demonstrate disease-modifying activity with that candidate before coming in, for example, in vivo and in vitro studies showing that this generally works in some setting. If it's one of the other product types, that they have developed a prototype of some sort that shows as a proof of concept. At the end of the award period, we expect the grantees to have completed pre-IND or other pre-submission meeting with the FDA if it's part of their regulatory process, or if it's a tool for them to transfer their design to a manufacturer to make it available to others as a tool. This slide is just to show the sequence of events in terms of developing a product and where translation fits in. If translation, if somebody is following our funding opportunities and receiving awards, would follow their discovery award with the TRAN award from a 24 to 30 month period before going into perhaps a Clin 1 to do their IND enabling studies and maybe subsequently a clinical trial. So there are at least a couple of steps before getting to patients if they succeed. The review criteria that are used by the grants working group to assess these projects are similar to the clinical program, focused on significance and impact, rationale, plan and design and the feasibility, as well as addressing needs of underserved communities. However, the scoring for these applications is a little different. It is based on a scale of 1 to 100 with a score of 85 to 100, meaning that it's recommended for funding if funds are available. And anything that scores between 1 and 84 is not recommended for funding. And all the applications are scored by scientific members of the working group with no conflict. And we take the median of all the individual scores to determine what the final score is for each application. As with the clinical program, we have the composition of the grant working group that includes the scientific members. We do the scientific evaluation and provide a scientific score. Our patient advocate and nurse members provide the perspective on significance and potential impact in oversight and process. And this is the first round where they are also now providing a DEI score. So we've just introduced the DEI scoring element into the TRAN program, and this is the first cycle. And then once again, we bring in scientific specialists as needed to help us assess applications when needed. This is a reminder of the conflicts of interest that may exist for the TRAN applications. So these two members have a conflict with one or more of the applications that we will be discussing. This is a summary table of the grants working group recommendations for the TRAN applications. There are 4 applications that received a score of 85 or above that are recommended for funding. Those 4 applications total to 16.2 million. The funds available to fund currently are 70.4 that were allocated at the beginning of the year for 2 cycles. This is the first of 2 cycles. And for each award, the final award amount, as noted below, does not exceed the amount approved by the board and could be reduced contingent on terms assessment of allowable costs and activity. I want to remind everyone about minority reports. So under Prop 14, any application that is not recommended for funding by the grants working group, meaning that it got a score below 85, but which had 35% or more of the members scoring to fund the application, such applications must include a minority report. And the minority report is included as part of the review summary that we prepare for you and provides a brief synopsis of the opinion of reviewers that score the application 85 or above. So we did have one application that qualified for a minority report, which was TRAN 1-13996. And so in general, the term team concurs with the grants working group recommendations for funding the 4 applications that were mentioned that received a score of 85 or above. But in addition, the CERM team supports the minority position for this particular application, TRAN 1-13996, and recommends funding of that application. Now, the rationale for that is in part summarized in the minority report itself, but the reason for CERM's recommendation centers on 2 elements that we think were the key concerns for the application. The first is that in the application, the applicants did make a claim of superiority of their product for which adequate evidence was not provided. But it is something that is planned as part of their proposal. So some of the reviewers were okay with that and didn't feel that additional studies at this time were necessary given that they were planned, but others did prefer to see it before moving forward, and therefore there was that divide. CERM is comfortable funding this award and having the applicants conduct these studies during their initial funding phase, and it would make for a logical milestone. The second element that we felt was key was that reviewers were unclear about the need to repeat some of the studies that were proposed with the GMP vector and plasmid. The applicants did in their letter, they provided a letter that's addressed to the board where they lay out a key reason for needing to redo much of the work, which was done initially by a company, and so they no longer have access to that data in order to submit to the FDA and meet FDA requirements, needing to repeat, unfortunately, some of that work. And so STRM itself also feels that it is important to conduct these studies and would benefit the project to do so. And therefore, the project as planned, we believe is appropriate and why we are recommending it for funding. It is also important to note that this applicant has come in already. This is a revised application that they came in with in this cycle, and so did also provide some improvements to the application from the previous version. All right, let me stop the share on this particular presentation and then show you the list of applications. Give me a second. All right, so hopefully you can see the Excel file that shows the 4 recommended applications here that total the 15.2. The application that received a minority report or that qualified for a minority report that the STRM staff is recommending is shown here. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Gil. So our voting on these awards is a little more complicated than on the CLIN awards. So it's a 4-step process. First, I'm going to ask if there are any motions to move any of the projects currently not recommended for funding up to the funding range. Secondly, I will ask for any motions to move any that are recommended for funding down to the not recommended for funding range. Thirdly, we will then close out the projects in the not recommended for funding range. And finally, we will vote on approving those projects in the recommended for funding range. So with that, I will ask, are there any motions to move any of the projects currently not recommended for funding up to the funded range? I'm going to move that we move number 13996 up to the funded range, which is the project Gil just described. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that. This is David in San Diego.
Thank you, David in San Diego. Questions or comments from members of the board? I will just start off by noting that I agree with the team's analysis of why this should be moved up. I will simply add to that this was something that had 6 in favor of funding and 7 had it below the funding line. So this is not something that is way below in terms of the overall vote. And so that this is a minority report with a minority that's just below the majority. So this recommends a material number of the grants working group members who are in favor of this getting funded. Other comments or questions from members of the board?
Joe has his hand raised.
Joe.
Thank you. My question's on 13996, JT. I think this is a very important application to be pursued. I'm just curious about this being a resubmission, and if Gil, if you can tell us what was the previous score and how did they improve on that, please?
Sure, absolutely. I don't recall the previous score. I think it was also between 80 and 84. I think
it had an 83, Gil, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. So they may have, it's 83. Okay, so it may have had an 83 as well before. But it is difficult to compare a score from the previous. So if it falls within the same range, it means that the overall improvement may have been made on the concerns that were highlighted by the previous panel, but the new panel, even though we try to assign the same reviewers, may have viewed it as either not enough to address their concerns or may have found additional concerns. So it is, sometimes what happens is applicants will make improvements on the things they can't, and sometimes there are things that they cannot. I think in this particular case, there was the question of both the superiority and the data to show that, which is included in the proposal. The applicant, this is not necessarily highlighted as previous concern. The repeat of some of the studies was also not necessarily previously highlighted as a major concern. And so these in some ways are new, but we also feel that these are things that can easily be addressed and or are being addressed relative to the initial application that was submitted.
And I'd like to say that those concerns raised are addressed in the letter that was sent to the board that's included in your materials and online. Other questions or comments from members of the board?
Larry has his hand raised, and then Fred.
Thank you. Larry.
Yeah, I want to just support Gil's analysis of why this should be moved up for funding. And in particular, I'll point out that ultimately for FDA approval, the manufacturing process is going to have to be reproducible. And so it's really important for this group to demonstrate that they can reproduce what was originally done in a company with production of the vector. And so I think that's quite a salient remark and really ought to be considered.
Thank you, Larry. I'm sorry, Maria, who was next? Was it Fred?
I think it was me. So from a process point of view, we don't have the benefit of feedback from the group that reviewed this proposal related to the applicant's response to hear from them whether or not the applicant's response is sufficient to increase their scores or resolve their concerns. I'm assuming that's the case, but just wondering, because it would be nice to be able to benefit from the group that had the concerns to address any change of heart they've had as a result of reading the response.
Right. So right. We don't have the benefit of the reviewers reading the letter to the board, if that's what you mean. We do, however, yeah. Okay. But I was just pointing out that we do have the benefit of having largely the same reviewers look at the second revised application as those that saw the initial one.
And I would add, Fred, that our team sort of they know what the concerns were of the GWG, and they have the letter responding in front of them, and they act as a bit of a surrogate of sorts to responding to the response, and based on that have made a recommendation that we move this up. So it's not quite the same, but we have a very informed analysis of that letter by Gil and members of the team to go by here.
I appreciate that and have great respect for the team, and certainly that weighs heavily in my thinking about moving this up. So thank you.
Thank you. Maria, other questions or comments from members of the board?
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, do we have comments from members of the public?
I believe we do, but I do not see hands raised. So perhaps not, after all.
Looks like Martin has his hand up.
Sorry, Martin, go ahead. Is this regarding this application? You're on mute, I'm sorry. Martin, is it in reference to this application?
Yes, it's 14001. and I submitted letter to the board.
Oh, no, this is a different, I'm sorry, this is a different application that we're talking about right now. So it's,
Okay.
if there's public comment for this application.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Joe Toscano, UC Davis. I think there are some public comments.
Yes, I can hear you.
Dr. William Murphy, I think, is going to comment, and then myself as well, and maybe a patient advocate.
Great. I just don't see any hands raised and no one's unmuted themselves. So I can't distinguish between, so if you want to start or if.
Hello, I'm sorry, this is Bill Murphy. Can you hear me now?
Great. Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Oh,
You'll
great.
have 3 minutes for public comment.
Excellent, thank you. I'll be brief. I'm sorry, I was trying to hit 9 and it wasn't working. First, I want to thank the committee. I found that the comments were extremely helpful. I hope that the letter that we wrote in response cleared up some of the issues, because it really wasn't clear on why we needed to generate primary data based on the efficacy that was shown by our collaborators in the paper that was published in Science Translational Medicine. But I think that sort of clarifies on, and that was what was kind of the confusing parts as far as why did we need to redo things based on the vector, but then also the fact that we were already clearly seeing tremendous synergy and anti-tumor effects. So I guess the bottom line is, I think that based on what we wrote in the letter, hopefully it clarifies as far as how we improved. Also, our DEI received excellent scores. So we think that was really overall, we're ready to go to the next stage. I just can't say, I've been doing cancer immunology for 35 years, and CAR T cells are going to be, in my opinion, the next wave. And this requires that dance between, molecular therapy, gene therapy, cell engineering, immunology, and preclinical modeling. And the team that I think is assembled that is going to make this now accessible within our catchment area is tremendous. So I can't speak enough. And on another note, we've already been successfully establishing the models, and we have the data that we're getting now is just incredible. This tri-specific or the dual CAR construct is, I think, in cancer, because antigen loss is always the issue, a major issue. I think this is really going to be a game changer. And this could then increase applicability for a variety of patient populations. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to say. And I appreciate the committee's enthusiasm and the reports that we've seen. And hopefully these issues were cleared up. I've been doing these preclinical modeling for 35 years. And I can tell you, we'll be looking at it very carefully as far as all the caveats pro, efficacy as well as on the tumor. So nothing will be unturned. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy.
Okay, this is Joe Toscano, UC Davis. Just a couple of quick comments. I've been at UC Davis working in translational research for immunotherapeutics for 30 years, both here in the NIH, and also have a large portfolio of clinical trials, take care of a lot of patients, director of the transplant program here. So I have a broad perspective and have watched and have good perspective on translating things from the bench to the bedside. I think we're all aware of the potential of CAR T products. The current FDA approved products, again, work very well. Most respond, but the vast majority relapse. Those patients that relapse have a dismal prognosis. They really have few therapeutic options that produce durable remissions, with the exception of allogeneic transplant, which is very toxic, and many don't have suitable donors. So that's not really an option for the majority of patients. So this product really will address a significant unmet clinical need, has the potential to significantly reduce relapse rates and or be an option, a salvage option for these patients that fail FDA-approved standard of care CAR T products. And I think that Bill, mentioned the team. He didn't do it justice. The team here is impeccable. It's amazing. Bill Murphy is a world-renowned T-cell, NK cell biologist. Jan Nolta, oh my gosh, just a world-renowned stem cell biologist. Gerhard Bauer, he's been making CAR Ts for other universities, our universities, other industries, uniquely poised to bring this to patients. Merdada Betty, and then Karen Cross. Karen Cross is an amazing collaborator that really focuses on bringing things to patients, not necessarily profit. So it's very refreshing, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Maria, are there other hands raised for public comment?
I believe they mentioned one other person who might be giving public comment, and if so, you can unmute yourself, and otherwise, I think we'll be done. I think that was it. Oh. I
It's
saw
Nathan
it.
Neal.
Go ahead. Thank you. Jason?
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
No. He was a patient advocate, but I guess he couldn't stay on. So
Okay.
I guess
Thank you. JT, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Could you please call the roll on this motion?
Yes. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow,
Aye.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Aye.
Isabel Dudon.
Aye, except if I have any conflicts.
You don't have a conflict with this one.
Thank you very much. Aye.
You're welcome. Mark Fisher Colbury. Mark? Fred Fisher.
Aye.
Elena Flowers.
Just clarifying that the current motion is just to move 13996 into the consideration for funding. Yes, yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Rich Lahara.
Yes.
Yes.
Christine Miskowski.
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Marvin Southard. Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Yes.
Carol Watson.
Yes.
The motion, let me just go back to, is Mark Fisher Colbury in the room? Or in the Zoom room? No, I do not see him. Okay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, so we now go on to step 2. Are there any motions to pull any of the projects recommended for funding down to the not recommended range? Okay, hearing none. We
JT,
now, yes.
You might ask if there are any other applications that board members wanted to move up.
Okay, I assume since nobody had said anything. Okay, yes, we'll do that. Are there any other applications any board members wish to move up to the recommended for funding range? Okay, hearing none. Are there any projects that board members want to move down from the recommended for funding to the not recommended for funding range?
Fred has his hand raised.
Yes, Fred.
Should we be talking about 13997, given that it was a split decision? Which I assume means no minority report, since there wasn't a minority. So I'm not exactly making a motion to move it down, but I'm just wondering if we should be, or at what point we should be discussing what we should take away from that split and a borderline score.
So it is in the recommended for funding range. If there is no motion to move it down, then we will not be generating any discussion on that topic. So unless you would like to recommend that it be moved down for purposes of discussion or otherwise, I think we're taking it as is.
Well, I'll then make the motion to move it down, and if there's no second, I won't be insulted.
Okay, it's been moved to move item or project 13997 down from the funded to the not recommended range. Is there a second? Not hearing one, Fred, so going to go as is. Thank you for raising that question. Are there, now we're going to go down to, is there a motion that we not approve? It's a negative, not approve those projects in the not recommended for funding range as a group. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Fred. Is there a second?
Marv Southard seconds.
Seconded by Marv. Any questions or comments from members of the board on this motion? Maria, none, I'm guessing?
No.
Okay, is there any public comment on this motion?
I see a hand raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself, the number is 646. Go ahead.
Please
Yep.
identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Allison Brent. So I would like to take the opportunity to just thank the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee, and the Application Review Committee on behalf of this application for the Trans 113997, the development of a gene therapy for the treatment of Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. My name is Allison Brent, and I am the Chief Development Officer for MASI and the PI on this grant application. On behalf of the entire team at MASI, we're grateful for the opportunity to advance our program for this ultra rare disease called Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. And there are absolutely no approved therapies for this disease that has a huge clinical unmet need. With such incredibly promising proof of concept data, we're very grateful if we are able to receive the support to advance this program for children living with this devastating disorder. In addition, I'm the mother to a beautiful little girl that lives with another rare yet highly devastating neurodevelopmental disorder called Angelman syndrome, which many of you may know. And I can assure you that the impact that CIRM is making on so many scientific and patient communities is actually quite profound. There's promising clinical data in humans to support postnatal delivery of disease-modifying therapies like gene therapies in neurodevelopmental disorders, which have a large clinical impact of those living with these monogenetic non-degenerative diseases. This is a new era to potentially profoundly improve the lives of these children and their families, and we're very hopeful to be able to reach this goal for many other monogenetic neurodevelopmental disorders one day as well. MASI Therapeutics was started to advance very promising proof of concept work in collaboration with the research foundations made up of families of those impacted to ensure that proper diligence is done, that the programs are advanced, and that these therapies have every chance to make it to humans as quickly and as safely as possible. We work closely with the Pitt-Hopkins Research Foundation, a California-based not-for-profit organization, and they too are incredibly grateful and optimistic for your support of this award. The impact you will be making on so many rare diseases and lives of these individuals needs to be recognized, and we want to thank you for all of your support for this program and hopefully for many more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will file that comment under the next motion that will be raised after we vote on this, but we very much appreciate those comments and is very well articulated. So thank you very much. Maria, are there any public comments on this motion to not approve those projects in the not for recommended for funding range?
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, will you please call the roll?
I'll remind everyone of the motion, and that's to not fund those in the unfundable category. And if you could please say yes or no, except for those with which you have a conflict, if you have a conflict. Thank you. Dan Bernal.
Aye.
Judy Chow.
Yes.
Leandra Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Anne-Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon.
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Mark Fisher Colbury. Fred Fisher.
Aye.
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Rich Lahara.
Yes.
Christine Miscavige.
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Marvin Southard. Marvin.
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye, except for those which I have conflict.
Carol Watson.
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Thank you so much. And the motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. We're on to part 4 of this voting process, which is, do we have a motion to approve all those projects listed in the recommended for funding range?
So moved.
Moved by Fred,
Second by Marvin.
seconded by Marvin. Any questions or comments, members of the board?
I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by members of the public? And as noted a couple minutes ago, we incorporated those important comments from the last commenter in this motion. Any other public comment on this motion?
There are no more.
Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
I'd like to remind everyone again, yes or no, except for those with which you have a conflict, if you have a conflict. Dan Bernal.
Aye.
Judy Chow.
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon.
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Mark Fisher Colbury. Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Flahara.
Yes.
Steve Miskowski.
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Marvin Southard. Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye, except for those which I have a conflict.
Carol Watson.
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you, Gil, and your team for your usual excellent job. That concludes the action items on today's agenda. We are now down to public comment on any topics of any interest. Do we have any such public comment? Hearing none, that then concludes this agenda. I want to remind everybody our next board meeting is December 15th. It will be a full board meeting, and that is a big one. We are scheduled to vote on the new chair at that meeting. So we want to make sure to encourage everybody to have that on your calendar, and please plan on attending, and also to remind everyone that the January board meeting, which is the January 26th, is going to be in person. And at that meeting, we will officially swear in our new chair and vice chair Bonneville, as well as send the current chair and vice chair off riding into the sunset. So please ask everybody to make sure you attend that meeting if at all possible.
And
So-
go USA today at 11 o'clock against those Iranians.
Yes, big game. Fox TV.
Can I add, it's not the team we should be against, it's the leadership of Iran.
Thank you for making that point, Isabel. And any other sports comments? You know how much I welcome that sort of thing. No. Okay. Well, with that, everybody have a nice rest of November, and we will see you next month. Thank you very much to Maria and Doug and Mary Ann and everybody else who made this meeting run so seamlessly. So